as a people, begin to understand psychological messages that are brought into our mind and how those messages cause us to either grow in a positive way or grow in a negative way. Today, Dr. Amos Wilson has dedicated his life to the study of psychology as it impacts on the mind of black children. He is an adjunct professor of psychology at the New York Institute of Technology. He also taught at the College of New Rochelle. He is the author of a book that many of us have read and know and respect, called The Developmental Psychology of the Black Child. He's also in the process of writing a forthcoming book called The Foundations of a Afrocentric Psychopeutic Psychology. You're pretty heavy, brother. Let me say that again. Let me say that slow. Foundations of an Afrocentric Psychotherapeutic Psychology. Whoa. He's also a senior partner of the Harlem Graphics Art Center and the Africana Research Publications. And tonight he will be on WBIA at 8:30, for those of you tonight at WBIA. But New York City will hear him tonight, but we will hear him now. And it's a great honor and a privilege and a pleasure to introduce to you Dr. Amos Wilson.
WBAI, 99.5 FM. Yes, very, very important station, listener sponsored, and one of the few stations other than LIB that speaks directly to our interests. So I'll be sharing an evening here with Dr. Sekulu. Perhaps some of you may be familiar with him. Thank you very much, Professor Black and Dean Harris. And it's indeed a pleasure to share this time with you here today at the Borough of Manhattan Community College. I'm going to talk a little bit today about the developmental psychology of the black child. By the way, don't let that second book throw you. That is a working title, Foundations of an Afrocentric Psychotherapeutic Psychology. That just sort of keeps my thoughts in line. When it's actually published, which I hope to have published in the fall, it will have a different title, much shorter and less complicated, you can be sure. But you can see by the working title, it is concerned with a psychotherapeutic psychology and to a degree an educational psychology that is geared to move our people forward and based upon the psychology of black people and of African people, not the psychologies that you are normally taught here in the colleges and universities. Essentially, the psychologies you're being taught here and in the colleges and universities across this country is what we call the Eurocentric psychology. And I make a major differentiation between these two psychologies in terms of the history of these two peoples, European peoples and African people. Essentially, and I'll get back to that in a moment, because this history, of course, is a part of why I rationalize a developmental psychology of the black child. A lot of people like to think that the black child is some child who happens to be black. We have a lot of people who like to back off in that phrase, and I happen to be black, as if that's something that sort of fell on you by accident. And if you would have preferred, you would have had some other accident happen to you. Or the idea is that we are colored people, that all except for our skin color, we are no different from anyone else, and therefore we have no unique interest or psychologies or any other aspect of our personality that deserves study and understanding. But that is not the case. We study a developmental psychology of the black child because the black child is unique in many ways. And when I say unique and different, I am not implying inferior. That's another reason why a lot of us stay away from the adjective black or African. And particularly do we stay away from situations us never tire of pointing out their differences to us. And because we have been duped and hallucinated by their superiority talk and language, we tend to be reluctant to point out our differences because we think they imply our inferiority. It does not imply that at all. And there are many of us who think equality is the same as sameness, and they're not. You don't have to be the same as another people to be equal. Some of you who've been in the feminist movement, of course, are aware of that, where some feminists make the mistake of thinking they have to be the same as men in order to be equal with men. And certainly that is not the case. We don't need a world of just one sex. And so we can allow for differences without feeling as if any difference necessarily means inferiority. I would say that we have to look at the developmental psychology in terms of the history of black people, the physiology of black people, which is connected with the history, by the way, the psychosocial experience of black people, and the destiny of black people. And I think when you look along those lines, of course, others can be suggested. You will see that we need to study the black child as subject matter in its own right. When you go to a psychologist, social worker, or what have you, and you have some kind of problem, or you just want to engage in a bit of self-understanding, often, of course, a so-called case history is taken. Even in informal conversation, people sort of make a case history of each other. Where are you from? What do you do? What's your background? What kind of experiences you had as an individual? And there's sort of an evaluation there in their attempt to understand each other, in the sense that to a good extent, a person's psychology is determined or influenced significantly by that individual's history. We are at this moment, to a good extent, the result of our histories, our individual histories. Consequently, we cannot take the history of another individual and fully apply that history to you as an individual. We have to understand you as an individual in terms of your own history, to understand your behavior, to understand your motivations, the way you think, the way you imagine, the way you see the world, the way you relate to other people. Analogously then, when we try to understand the psychology of a people, we must understand the history of that people. And the history of African people and the history of African American people is not the history of European people. So consequently, we cannot take the psychology of Europeans, which is based on the European experience, and apply it directly to the psychology of black people. And I think this is one of the major problems and one of the major reasons why we misunderstand ourselves as black people, and others who, even with good intentions, misunderstand us, because the psychology upon which they want to base that understanding is a psychology based upon the history and experience of another people. And we have to understand that very clearly. The black child has a history, and that history is a part of the black child's personality. Even though the black child may have been born a year ago, its psychology is still influenced by the slave experience of black people 200 years ago. Our children cannot escape the history of slavery. Whether we as black adults and African adults wish to deny that history does not matter. Whether we want to develop an amnesia in relationship to our history does not matter. Even developing the amnesia becomes a part of the psychological problem. Your attempt to deny your slave history and your African history becomes a part of the psychology of black children, which is not the psychology of the white child. So even the absence of the knowledge of the history of our people in the minds of our children adds something unique to their psychology as children, and will affect the way they see themselves, the way they relate one to each other, the way they think, and the way they work in school and at play. So consequently then, if we're to understand the psychology of our people, we must understand the history of our people. And I don't only mean the history as it developed and advanced within the continental United States, but African history as a whole. Because even when we talk about the color of the black child, we're not just talking about color. We're talking about a color that represents an evolutionary history, hundreds of thousands of years old. We're talking about a child that carries in its color and in its body the history of the oldest people on this earth. For we are the first race on this earth, and we are the fathers of the other races on this earth. Both archaeology and molecular biology have established that as a fact. If you would trace the DNA in genes from a molecular biological point of view, you will end up back to an African Garden of Eden. When you look at the geological history of this earth, you will see that the African continent, before these continents broke off from one another, was at the center of a whole mass of land. If you would go to the coast of South Carolina and dig into that earth, you will see that earth layered in ways that the west coast of Africa is layered, because at one point this continent was a part of the African continent, as well as that of South America, as well as that of Australia, as well as that of India and other parts of this world, ladies and gentlemen. And man starts in Africa and he spreads out to the other continents. You can go to almost any landmass on this earth, and if you dig deep enough and go back far enough, you will find a black man having peopled that earth. That means England, that means France, that means China, Japan, Australia, and anywhere else you may choose to go. So when we talk about the black child, we're not talking about a child who happens to be black and who is only different because of color. We are talking about a child that has an immense history, an immense experience. We are talking about a child then that was shaped by hundreds of thousands of years of evolution and history. We are talking about a child whose Egyptian ancestors laid the basis of Western foundation. I'm often shocked about how many people who will engage in a conversation about Egypt, and are surprised when they realize that they're talking about a nation and an empire located on the African continent. Just to show how this world has played such games on our minds, that it plays such games that people can talk about Egypt, talk about its culture, never mentioning race, and never thinking about it in terms of its location. It's somehow disembodied and cut off from everything else. But yet this is the supreme African civilization, along with other civilizations. A civilization that taught the Greeks, and the Greeks, of course, ultimately teaching Europe itself. So we're talking about a black child that carries in its genetic structure and its orientation the very foundations of what we call today civilization. So even though the current civilizations are quite questionable as to how civilized they actually are. So when we talk about the black child again, we're also talking about a child that has physiological differences as well, not just in terms of color. When you study evolution, you know evolution in part is concerned with how different species adapt to their circumstances, to their ecologies. By the same token then, we must look also at people as well. If we're talking about African people, we're talking about a people who, to a good extent, have existed in certain geographical regions, who've lived under certain climatic conditions and other conditions, and adjusting to these conditions and adapting to these conditions, represent themselves in their bodies. As I often tell my classes in psychology, you not only live under certain conditions, the conditions live in you. And so consequently, our experience as African people and the conditions under which we live is represented in our bodies as African people. So consequently then, the African body cannot be an exact duplicate of the European body, of people who developed under different geographical and ecological circumstances. Consequently then, we'll have to look at the evolutionary history of black people, as well as the political history and social history of black people, as far as understanding the physiological development of ourselves as people and of our children. When you look then at the physiological development of the black child, you will note that that development is not an exact duplicate of the white child. In fact, the physiological development of the black child is so different from that of the white child and in advance of that of the white child until our children require a different nutritional chart to meet their nutritional needs. Their teeth do not grow at the same rate, their bones and so forth do not develop at the same rate, and that is they develop much more rapidly. They're going to walk earlier, they're going to talk earlier, their brains are born in a more advanced state of development as measured by EEG patterns that are correlated with so-called IQ. These children then will exhibit patterns of development that require that we have knowledge of their bodies and let us know that we cannot just go read Dr. Spock some so-called standard physiological text or nutritional text and apply it directly to our children's needs. The types of diseases that blacks tend to develop, the types of weaknesses and so forth are related to the African experience, related to the evolutionary experience. When we talk about sickle cell anemia, we will see that anemia is related to the African experience. When we talk about lactose intolerance in a large number of our children, that is the inability for some of them to digest cow's milk very well, we can look at the evolutionary history of black people and see the relationship of that particular element, if that's what you want to call it, to that history. When we talk about the color of skin, we must recognize that the brain is developed from the same embryological layer as is the skin, and that the nervous system is developed from the same embryological layer as is the skin. So the skin is not a mere covering and not a mere something that is colored or not colored in some kind of way. But the skin, the material that composes the skin also composes the brain and also composes the nervous system. The melanin, which is used to color our skin, is also used in the brain as a neurotransmitter, and it is used to coordinate various activities of the brain. There's a great deal of research going on now in terms of melanin and how it is utilized by the brain. There is some belief that this melanin is in part responsible for the athletic prowess of black people and responsible for other brain activities that we don't have time to go into today. But all I'm trying to say is we have to look beyond the situation of color. I like to think, and when I talk about the development of black children, I'm talking about a situation of where our children are able to do things and to exhibit behaviors on the very first and second days of life that it takes the European child some month and a half or more to develop. In some 60 indices of behavioral potential and behavioral exhibitions, the black child comes out ahead of the European child significantly in its development and growth. So again, we need to look at that, and a part of it appears to be related to the melanin content of the black skin and the black body itself. Now, I'd like to see then and I guess from one point of view, the walking and talking early of these black children as representing the early walking and talking of black man on this earth. The psychomotor activities of the black child representing the coordination of the black man on this earth at the very beginnings of human history. And just as this child is going to walk and talk and do other things early, we see the black man laying the foundations of civilization early as well in pre-dynastic Egypt and other civilizations. Another thing that differentiates this black child, of course, is something I alluded to earlier, and that is the psychosocial experiences of black people. I've indicated then that the history and experience of black people and of people in general contribute to their psychology. And consequently then, we have to look at the psychosocial experience of black people to understand the psychology of black people. When we as black Americans say we are Americans, we certainly may be identified with a geographical location, but it is not the same thing as when a white says he or she is an American, particularly from the experiential point of view. You have two people here who've had vastly and people whose outlook on life and perspectives on life and behaviors and relationships and so forth have been determined to a great degree by their experience on this American continent. To a good extent, the black man in this country is a creation of European desires. I've often said that the black American and Africans in general, because the European system is a global system. It is not one that's merely acted out here in America, even though this may be its most intense expression. It is acted out all over the world. And there, as well as there being what we may call a national division of labor, there is also an international division of labor, with the intent of European nations and many other nations of keeping African peoples in a state of servitude, no matter where they are located. It is the intent of those who rule this earth today that African people still be hewers of wood and carriers of water. That the chief function of African people is to produce raw materials, while the other nations develop technologically and scientifically. And that our function, even in this nation as African Americans, be that of servants. We were brought over here to serve another people, and it is an intention of those people that we still continue to serve them far into the distant future. Do not let the fact that you may here at Manhattan Community College be studying computer technology, that you're headed for your MBA, or that you're getting some other technological or other degree that you've advanced over your great slave grandparents. You have not advanced one whit. Because, ladies and gentlemen, the French, they say, have a saying that says, the more things change, the more they remain the same. And in a way, despite all of these dazzling changes we may have seen since the 60s, the essential relationship we have to other people is basically the same. In fact, those changes have been brought about to maintain the fundamental sameness. It functions in the way that neocolonialism functions. We will put up black heads of nations and so forth. However, the basic economic relationships, the basic economic exploitation of African people will continue. As a matter of fact, putting up black heads of state makes the economic exploitation of black people even easier. And I often must warn you, as I warn my own students, you are being educated here to put a black face on white power. You must be conscious. You're being educated to make people think because you have a job and you eat well, that black people somehow are entering and moving into a new age and a new set of power relationships. Nothing has fundamentally changed. Your black slave grandfathers and grandparents were not all field hands. They were not all house servants. The division of black labor under slavery was much more diverse than that. You had many skilled craftsmen who were slaves, shipbuilders, iron workers, and carpenters, and millwrights, and others. But they all worked for one fundamental thing, and that is the enrichment and the profits of their masters. So the fundamental situation is, even though now you may have jobs different from your parents, even though you may have professions different from your parents, you're still functioning in the same basic way. Your work is to produce the profits of another people and not to devolve to your own self and to your own advancement. So consequently, the fundamental relationship of servitude to another people, whether you make the vice president of Xerox, IBM, is still the same. That is, maintaining the profits and power of another people. And that should not be our goal. We think that we've entered into the space age because we have some black astronaut flying into space. You're not in the space race, and African people are not in the space race yet. You know, the first animal I think that went into space was a monkey, if you recall. Some of you may not be old enough to recall that. Does that mean that the monkeys now have entered into the space race? Not at all. You have not entered into that race, ladies and gentlemen, until those spaceships take off from the African continent and other African nations. And they have been designed by African engineers, and they have been financed by African money. Otherwise, I don't care how brilliant you are, you will still be contributing to the power and dominance of another people. There was reference made to my forthcoming book, An Afrocentric Psychotherapeutic Psychology, which means that the psychology will be oriented, of course, toward Africans and for Africans. It would mean also that when we talk about an African psychology, we are talking about a psychology that has some fundamental differences from the so-called standard psychology, which is a misuse of term, by the way. Under other circumstances, we may have a chance to talk about education, because I want our people to begin to get rid of this concept of standard education, equal education, those words that have been thrown around a lot. And this whole concept of education needs to be reorganized, as a matter of fact. Because many of us think education is merely provided for us to have jobs. And we think education is mainly provided so that we may rise in status and make a bit more money. Black people, if you think of education in those terms, you will ultimately be destroyed as a people on this earth. You must recognize that education is a fundamental part of your defense and survival as a people. That it is not just something you take and something you get for credits so that you can walk out and get a job or two. Not at all. And you must look at what it's about. We have a lot of people wrestling about the education of black children, and they start discussing the education of our children without defining the terms. By the way, this is another one of the constants that has remained despite changes, and that is the European power to define reality, the European control over definitions. You may be a majority here, and you may be a majority in the future, but as long as you are educated within the context of European definitions, you will be miseducated. You must redefine education. Many of you think that what is in the catalog of your book is worth learning. You see, we're deceived by that often. So therefore, if it's in the book and in the college catalog, it must mean something. It must be worth learning. Look at that seriously. And of course, the assumption is that which is not in the college catalog and that which is not put in the course curriculum must not be worth knowing. This is how black people are miseducated. Even when you get your A's, you are miseducated. You have to understand that. Because often what is left out of that college catalog are the most important things related to your own survival and advancement as a people. And consequently, if you make the assumption that those things which are not included in the catalog or in the course schedule are not worth knowing, then the things that are most important to you as a people, you will figure are not worth knowing. And consequently, the process of your education will be one of ignorance of self, lack of self-knowledge. And of course, that education will cripple you. Look at the situation. I have a business on 125th Street, a copy print business. We also do office supplies and word processing and a whole host of things there. We're on a street, though, where 95% of the customers are blacks. And yet we're on a street where I hope maybe 5% of the businesses are owned by black people. And yet, this increase in the number of people who own business other than black people on that street has been, I think, correlated with the number of blacks, that is, the increasing number of blacks who are getting degrees in business administration. You understand what I'm saying? At the same time you're getting degrees in business administration, you're not getting any businesses to administer. Which means that those degrees must be being given to you to work for another people and not advance your own interests as a people. And if you'll look at these degrees that will be handed out to you in this institution and others, you will see they essentially are handed out so that you can serve the interests of another people and not yourself. That's because in these courses in economics and bookkeeping and all the others, when you look in those textbooks, you will not see yourself there, and you will not see the issues that are pertinent to your economic and social development there. A course is not only defined by its subject name, it is defined by the issues and the problem that it confronts. And when you take these courses and the economic and other issues that confront under certain conditions, and its behavior is conditional. Well, if you do this, then you'll get food. If you do that, we'll give you a big shock. If you do the other thing, we'll give you water. And you can manipulate that rat's behavior in various sorts of ways by manipulating rewards and punishments. And I know many of you have learned that segment very, very well. And you know, you can get deep into various ratios and schedules, you know, the ratio schedules and interval schedules of rewards and punishment, partial reinforcement, continuous reinforcement, and you can just go on and on and on with it. You may learn this as a black student as well or better than your white counterpart. Get an A in the course. But you've been miseducated if that's as far as you've gone with it. Because, students, if you as black students do not learn that we are the rat, we have been miseducated. You must understand that. I often tell my students, let's look at that rat situation as a political circumstance. You see? Let's look at that experimenter as having certain political power over this rat. And it is the political differential between this experimenter and the rat that allows that experimenter to create the rat and create in the rat a personality and a behavioral orientation. It is that experimental's political power to control the very vital essentials of that rat's life that makes that experimental capable of conditioning that rat. When that experimenter is through with that rat, it's not like any other rat. It has been created. It is artificial. It is no longer natural. It lives under certain circumstances. It lives in that box. But it not only lives in that box, the box will begin to live in it. And in its behavior, it will reflect having lived under those conditions. So if you as a black student identify with that experimenter, given our present political, social circumstances, you have misidentified yourself. If the white student identifies with it, he's closer to reality because his fathers and mothers are a part of that political differential that determines when black people are going to get fed, when they're going to get water. Think about perhaps where you live today. Where does the water come from? Who has control of it? Who has control of the food? Who turns the lights on and off if you don't exhibit some bill-paying behavior? Who determines how the jobs that you go to? Who tells you how to dress? Who tells you what kind of language to speak? Get rid of that bad black English and learn standard English. Talk this way, dress this way, walk that way. And you will see in every aspect of our lives, because another people have profound economic and social control over our lives, they create in us certain personality orientations. In other words, then, we can see Skinner boxes all over this world as far as black people are concerned. Not only in the ghettos of New York City and across this nation, but in whole African nations where we've let other people have control over the vital resources of our lives. And they manipulate these resources so as to manipulate our attitudes, to manipulate our level of functioning, to manipulate our relationships one to the other, to exploit, use, and abuse us as people. You can begin to see then how the very language in which your psychology book is written becomes a part of your own miseducation. A book full of cats and dogs and experiments run upon them, but a book that does not discuss your real situation so that you can move beyond the so-called basic principles of psychology into self-understanding and see how those basic principles apply to yourself and how they are used by other people against you. I have to tell my students, this book isn't written to you, and it's not. It's not even written for you. It's not. It's written to another people and for another people. And yet, when you look in that psychology book, if you learn to read between the lines, if you can go beyond what is the obvious statements in that book, you will see the whole program through which you're created as a people, European is a minority in the world. That this population of people comprises about 10% of the world's population. And a good deal of the psychology we should be understanding then is, how can that 10% of the world's population manipulate and control the other 90%? And this becomes particularly acute when we recognize that the world's wealth, natural minerals and so forth, are under the soils of that other 90%. And it's a vital question that a black psychology has to answer and deal with. Why is it that when we see Africans literally starving to death above vital resources without which this country could not function? When we look at South Africa, we see an area of Africa that is vital to the space-age technology of this nation. These minerals and these substances that are dug out of the southern African soil, if they were not exported and imported into this nation, you would not enjoy a lot of the so-called technology you now take for granted. And the African continent is essentially the only continent other than Russia that contains some of these vital minerals. I mean, some of these minerals are produced almost up to 100% of this nation's need. And yet we see black Africans starving above this kind of wealth. And yet we see nations such as Japan with hardly no mineral base whatsoever as what? An extremely wealthy and powerful nation. That means, ladies and gentlemen, some kind of psychology exists in this world such that the rich are made poor and made to think that they are poor, and the poor are made rich and made to think that they are rich. And you must understand that the educational process you are undergoing and the educational process our children are undergoing is a part of this deception and a part of maintaining this deception, such that the nations that depend upon the wealth of our lands are made to seem independent, and then our nations are made to seem dependent. And you will see this in many other areas of the world. So then you can see in the very way the book is written, the miseducation. But isn't it arrogant? Isn't it gross? I tell my students, here this book is right before you. All of the secrets are right here. Isn't that arrogant? But it must mean that they're pretty sure that you are not going to what? See through it. It's gonna, they must be pretty sure that because you have such a fear of words, that you're traumatized by words, that you're not going to read beyond what you see there. Don't have time today. I could even talk about how many of our students read and approach literature that reflects our political social condition in the world. The way you handle sentences, the way you handle information is reflective of the intention of this society. The black person essentially is taught what to think in this system, because it is the mentality of the servant. The servant is told what to do. The master is taught how to think. And much of your education will be the education of a parent. Learning and memorizing what other people have developed and regurgitating it on exams. Learning enough just to carry out the orders of others, but not to challenge the power of others. And yet we see this in book after book, not only psychology, but in almost any textbook you can open in this system of education. So essentially all I'm saying is then, and to go back for a moment, when I talk about the physiological development of black children and their psychological development being in advance of the white child, you wonder then what happens. To a good extent, you will see the advanced advantage of the black child being lost around the age 5, 6, and as they move into these first, second, and third grades. And essentially, the advantage is lost due to the need for language as a tool for dealing in the world. That is, as language becomes more and more important as a means of manipulating the world and manipulating the environment and adapting to the world, our people began and our children began to fall farther and farther behind. And it becomes very, very important then that we are to advance the interests of our children, that they, of course,
develop the abilities and maintain the abilities to manipulate symbols. This, of course, also has implications as well. And this inability or this reduced ability to handle symbols, which includes mathematical symbols and everything else as well, is of course a part of maintaining the servitude of black people. To a good extent, the structure of this society, regardless of its institutions, is designed to maintain the servitude of our people. You can look at every one of them. In other words, when you look at institutions in this system in relationship to black people, you will see that they are turned backwards. Because, of course, in order to maintain us as people in the position we're in, our minds and our orientations toward the world literally have to be turned backwards. We have to be made backwards, even in the process of education. Ladies and gentlemen, we couldn't be in the condition we're in unless we were out of our minds. And this is one of the central starting points of my book on Afrocentric psychology. And that is, if the European intends to maintain power, and the European does, and to exploit the rest of the world as the European does, it means then that the maladjustment of black people, of African people, the neuroses of black people, troubled interpersonal behavior among black people is a political necessity. I want you to understand me well when I say that. That it is politically necessary for black people to be crazy. And we have to start from that fundamental point. Not from mother and child relations, not in ego struggles and conflicts within the personality, not even the old behavioristic psychology. Because if black people were in our right minds, and if we were in our right relationships, one to the other as people, if these so-called third world people could connect collectively and act as one and recognize their true interests and organize themselves instead of being organized by other people who have their exploitation in mind, this world would not be the way it is today, and the power relationships would not be what they are today. One of the things I look at in this forthcoming book, of course, is how the maladjustment in the black mind functions economically for Europeans. You know, black people are supposedly 12% of this population, right? But they consume about 34, almost 40% of the cosmetics. In other words, the cosmetics industry is dependent upon black people. Interesting situation is, why do we need so many more cosmetics than other people do? Is it because, ladies and gentlemen, we have some trouble with our image and the beauty of ourselves as African people? Is it the fact that a sense of unattractiveness has been so inculcated in us that we try to cover it over with tons and tons of cosmetics and try to change our features and undergo plastic surgery and everything else to try to change our features such that we keep the cosmetics industry alive? When you look at the so-called maladjustments that you can name in the black personality, you will see, if you trace it far enough, that those maladjustments are necessary to maintain economic dominance of other people. In other words, while you're dealing with this sense of ugliness, you enrich Revlon and all the rest of them and impoverish yourself. And do you think then a people whose very lives and economy depends upon a psychological sense of ugliness, a psychological sense of inadequacy, which you try to fulfill by buying clothes and buying a lot of junk and a lot of jewelry and a lot of other crap that we see out here that you use, buying inflated sneakers and all this other stuff to try to make up for the emptiness and the sense of inferiority? Do you think that those people will ever rescue you from that state of mind when their very economy depends on it? You must recognize then the functionality of black maladjustment. And whether you're educated or not, that maladjustment is going to stay right in there because it serves the interests of another people. And therefore your study of psychology and sociology and history should not be a matter of just studying group behavior and history and so forth, but it should be a process of understanding yourself. It is not enough this month that you look at your black heroes and look at black civilizations and so forth. You must look also to see how the history of black people, both negative and positive, has created the current mentality of black people create our history and experience in such a way as to create our minds and maintain us in a position of servitude. You will see then every institution in this system is dedicated to that one end, maintaining us in subjugation. And they will be backwards. You look at the corrections or criminal justice institution. There you must find injustice and a lack of correction. The black man must be criminalized because the criminal justice system is an industry worth billions of dollars. And the black man is the raw material that is processed through it, so that a whole lot of people make their living off of it. And he's processed from 12 right on up to maybe 40 or something by the time he's worn out and worn down, and a whole new crop comes in. So the cop gets his piece on the block. The judge, the lawyer, the court officers, and the whole system, all the way to the people who sell electricity, to the prisons, to people who sell food, to people who build the prisons and so forth. Do you really think those people are serious about rehabilitating you when you're so lucrative to their life? You're out of your mind. Do you think an educational system that depends on special education money is going to keep your children out of special education classes? You have to be out of your mind to believe that. Black on black crime. Maybe I'll get a chance to talk with you about that one day, to show how the black criminal, so-called, becomes an ally of the power system and is used by that power system. I was looking at a program talking about the endangered black man the other day. And you know, and it was interesting, and you had these black professors, you know, they come from the big universities and so forth. It's interesting to watch that crowd too. And you wonder, how did they get there, you know, because often nothing of real interest is said, and you get the repeated stuff you can hear anyway, but somehow they're there. And then they were lamenting about the fact how when they go to stores, the store doors are closed in their faces, you know. Here I am with my degrees, and I'm going to go to buy a diamond ring, and the white person locks the door and keeps me out, won't let me in. I think even Oprah complained about that one day, if I recall. Said she wanted somebody, they went and called across the street and called the store and let them know they were okay. And when they got back again, they still locked the door in their face. What is going on here? One young man on that program, I think, made the most pertinent statement, which was that being born black, I was born a suspect. And he recognized a fundamental thing there, that every black man is suspect. Every black man is perceived as a criminal. It doesn't matter how well educated I am, how well dressed I am. How often do I feel the fear and intimidation of some people if I get into an elevator with them? And you know, you have to sit out your little body language and say, I'm okay, you know. You hold up your times, hey, I'm one of you, you know, something like that. I'm not gonna hurt you. But it's degrading in many ways to have one misperceive your personality simply because you happen, so-called happen to be black. But if that is the case, if black men are seen as criminals in the first, as the first impression, it must imply then a need in the other people to see us as criminals. In other words, it speaks to a fundamental psychology within those people. The seeing of black men as criminal must be necessary to their own psychological well-being and their own psychological state of mind. There must be a need in this society to criminalize the black man. So consequently, you see black men who have not even committed a crime being framed and sent to jail. We see this going on all the time. Because, ladies and gentlemen, one of the reasons is that this black man must be taken out of circulation, because this male is seen as the most aggressive of the species, and therefore, if you can intimidate them and lock them up, there are over 200,000 or 300,000 black men in these prisons. And if you can miseducate them, you take them out of competition, and your own status quo and your own position of power is maintained. So consequently, the black male must be destroyed in any way possible. And this is what we have going on. Not only must he be destroyed directly by miseducation, by criminalization, and he must be made an ally of the oppressive system by attacking his own. Yes. And because, ladies and gentlemen, the majority of rapes are black women being raped, not white women. The majority of cars being stolen, the black people's cars being stolen, Majority of the houses being broken in, the black people's houses being broken in. The majority of victims of violence from other blacks are other black people, ladies and gentlemen. Even though it's projected the other way around, some innocent white woman being taken by some burly black man. That is not the reality of the situation at all. But that is the image projected. There must be a need for this other people to project that image. And that need is to create a psychology in our people such that we will not challenge the status quo. So we see then this need to maintain psychological imbalance. How is this accomplished in the black mind? But as I've said before I go to that, you will see a reversal in institutions. In other words, the criminal justice system will make criminals of black people, no rehabilitation. The economic system will keep you poor. We see a situation like that. Black people within this nation, if looked upon as a nation, would be the 9th or 10th richest nation on this earth. Almost $300 billion black people produce and spend in this country. And yet the black business person doesn't get hardly a nickel of that dollar. And therefore we cannot support our own institutions, our own colleges, and our own universities, and I'll indicate, but it is very important for us. We have no control over our economy. We enrich and take care of other people's families while our children starve right here on the street. We have to even induce the criminality of our children by giving our wealth away to other people and leaving them without any wealth. And therefore, they succumb to the temptations of this culture. And some of them then decide that they're going to steal them or take them by so-called illegitimate means. The educational system must make you dumb. Blacks are educated into ignorance. The very process of your education is one of becoming ignorant. When you're educated, you see, because while you're learning something, you're ignoring something else. And if you're being educated along the lines of another people, for the purposes of another people, to the advantage of another people, if that is the knowledge you're getting, then you're becoming ignorant of knowledge that is relevant to yourself. And therefore, often the deeper you get into the knowledge that's laid down by those people, the more ignorant you become. And then you wonder why, despite all of your education and your degrees, we're still in the condition economically, socially, and politically that we are in. And despite the fact we produce more and more degrees, we're still behind in the world because there's something vital missing in the education. The education of black children, we hear this talked a lot about today. This is a structure that needs to be completely uprooted and reoriented completely. But again, as I said earlier, if you don't define what education is and what it's about, you don't see it. What have we got going here? Let's look at New York, for instance. Suppose you educated 95% of black and Hispanic students and educated them in such a way that they could compete successfully with Europeans and others in this city. Think about that for a moment. These people, we black and Latinos, are approaching the majority of the population in this city. We will soon be the majority of the workforce in the city of New York. What would happen then if we educated 95% of black and Latino children such that they could compete successfully against others? You begin to get my drift. You have an economic problem here. You have a situation of either where we would have to bump these other people out of these jobs and cut that train off from Long Island and all the rest of these places that are coming in here. Or the economy of New York City would have to expand to such a degree that it could absorb our children along with the other people. Think about that and think about why New York City seems to have such a great difficulty educating black children. And you will see that they are not disconnected. It is easier to say that your children don't have jobs and are not successfully integrated into the economy by saying that they can't read and they can't write, than by saying, well, they're educated and we know they're ready, but we're keeping them out because they're black. So there's an easier political game played there by saying, well, you know, we would let you have it, but you're just not appropriately educated. And so they don't get appropriately educated on the lower levels. And those who so-called get appropriately educated are educated in such a way, with such a value orientation and twist, until they cannot apply the education outside of the system. They cannot bring their talents to the black community. They can only serve the other people. So you got two major forms of education. One that just drops our people out completely or educates them. Another that educates a few and uses them for propaganda and twists their values such that they can be used to maintain the repression of the rest of them. And this is what it's about. And this is the kind you're receiving here too. May as well face up to the facts and see through it. Because if you don't see what you're doing from your perspective as African people, you're being messed up. And we have to recognize that. The black man is recreated because he's separated from his African self. That's the process. I've often said you cannot be an African and a slave at the same time, in a deep psychological sense. You cannot be truthfully and pridefully an African and relate to each other as African people the world over and be the dupes and subordinates of European power. It can't happen. The ruling over our people, over this world, has to be brought through a process of false individualism and a process of separating us from our African identity as people. And of course, when you look at the slave experience in America, just don't look at it in terms of how much cotton they had to pick and this and that, or what the slave contribution was to the economy and this and that. Look at it in terms of a brainwashing procedure. Look at it in terms of a personality altering procedure. What is happening to the African during this process? Why is this African losing language and culture and African perspective and African social organization and so forth? What happens to this African as the language and the culture and so forth is being knocked out of him? You will see then an African being niggerized. You will see then an African being turned into a servant. So when you look at that slave period, also read the psychology of brainwashing. See, I often tell my people who come to me sometimes, you even read the wrong book. Read the books that they don't tell you to read. Because you got to reverse the whole process, you see. Read about the Moonies. Interesting. Why? Read about how and what means they so-called transform personality. Why does the society not like them? It doesn't like any group that appears to get out of its control. And a part of this separation then, and so a part of the process then, is to separate us from our African identity, because if you're in one with your identity, no other identity can be what? Placed in you. It's only when you become separated from your basic identity that you leave room and you leave a vacuum for another identity to be introjected and inculcated in your personality. And in order for the servant to be inculcated in our personality, in order for the inferiority complex to be inculcated in our personality, in order for us to lose our self-confidence, in order for us to lose our pride as a people, in order for us to lose the sense that we can be masters on this earth and not secondary servants to another people, in order for us to lose our ability to act collectively and to relate to each other collectively, we had to first be separated from our African identity. We had to first look for another identity and have that identity projected into us by the people who would use us. Classic brainwashing techniques. Separating and having the individual to reject the old identity, creating a crisis, and then at the price of getting over the crisis, having the individual adhere to new values and new orientations as a reward, and therefore become servants to the personality, even the people who injected the new personality in. And this was done by having us become ignorant of our culture, make us, and by degrading the African culture, by making everything African, by associating everything African with negativity. This, again, is something you should talk about when you get into the psychology of association, Just don't talk about it the way it's talked about in the class period. Let's look and see what has been associated to the word black. Let's see what concepts have been associated to the word African. And you will see then the associations to African and to black are such that people want to escape from blackness and want to escape from being African. such that when they say that they are black and they say that they're African, they feel some kind of anxiety and some kind of pain. This system is one such that European power permits it to attach rewards and punishments almost to anything it wants to. And therefore, trying to separate the black man from his African identity, he then loads that African identities with negative associations, such that the African man himself do not want to claim that identity. He wants to run away from it and call himself everything else but an African. I am a human being. You know, we get into abstractions. You know, I am a human being. I am, an American. I am this, anything, but don't call me African. And it is that separation that provides the energy for other people to dominate us. And you'll see that separation taking place in black children and being a part of our creation as a people. We then become alienated from ourselves. We seek to escape our blackness. We don't have time to talk about that today, but that's hooked into drug addiction. That's hooked into a lot of things we complain about in this society. It's even hooked into your love life.
Yes, indeed.
I'm telling you. Because when you run away from your African self, you're running away from reality. And the very essence of sanity is being in touch with reality and knowing who and what you are. When you escape your African heritage, and you are whether you want to admit it or not, when you escape your African identity and try to deny that identity, then you are escaping an essential basis of personality. You're removing a major contact of reality, I mean to say. And when a person is separated from reality, they cannot handle it well, and in a sense, they're maladjusted and sick in the world. And they will be defeated by reality. You cannot be separated from your African self. You cannot be separated from your African identity and be in your right mind and know what is really going on in the world. It is impossible. And yet there are many of us who want to be separated. So then, through the association of African things with negativity, we seek to escape African self. Therefore, we tend to fall in love with anything that helps us to deny who and what we are. You know some of us, when we go to Europe, and the French treat us so nice and all that. Here's some black people, I forgot I was black. That's the greatest feeling in the world, but I can forget who I am and what I am about. And so anybody that can make us forget who we are and what we are about can manipulate us any way they want to. Because as long as they keep producing that kind of feeling, we feel good. And we become attached to them because they make us feel good. We even define love in this society in terms of good feeling, don't we? Yes. How wonderful we feel, how out of our minds we are. That's right. You mean to tell me you can't eat, you can't sleep, you can't do this? Oh, you must be in love. Why should love be something that puts you out of your mind? Why should such a fundamental force be something that makes you crazy? I don't believe true love needs to make you crazy. No. And yet we define it that way. When you look at it closer, you won't be able to find the difference between love for crack and love for another person. And to a good extent, we'll start falling in love with the wrong people because we define that love in terms of how they make us feel. And if we're trying to escape reality and they keep trying to bring us back to it, we'll hate them, even though they are friends. Those who help us to escape reality and deny who and what we are, we'll love them because we feel euphoric when we've escaped ourselves. And consequently, we'll often love our enemies, you see, because they take us outside ourselves and manipulate. And you can see then the black family often falling as a result of that kind of alienated love. A love based on what? Self-hatred. When I talked about these black people buying things and supporting other groups other than their own, that is the result of alienation. It means, ladies and gentlemen, that an alien spirit has been introjected into the African personality. Black people, because of their separation from their African heritage and from their African selves, have become possessed by another spirit. As we became separated, another people introjected another set of values and another set of orientations within our breast as African people. And when a possessing spirit is in your breast and in your personality, that possessing spirit serves the master that put it in there, not you. see in the movie The Exorcist, the devil that's in that young girl's personality is there to serve the devil. When you let your spirit be imbued in you by an education that's defined by other people, by an education that's made to suit their purposes, by a religion that's made to define another people with that white Jesus, by other orientations that become a part of your personality and outlook on life, you're going to serve those other people and you're going to work against your own interests. And you see then the evil spirit that has control of a person's personality destroys that person. Hence that person appears to be what? Self-destructive. It makes you want to smoke crack. It makes you want to do every kind of nasty thing that will do damage to your body. Because it gets a curious alien appetite as well. It wants everything that's outside of itself to put in itself to destroy itself. And this is the part of the process of the alienation of black people. And alienated people can only serve whom? Aliens, not themselves. And alienated people can only buy from other people, but not themselves. They can knock their brains out with this music, but yet the people who make these musical instruments and stuff, you don't see them walking around with music jammed up their ears. And we see it all the time. Because we are here to buy the garbage and the playthings of other people. And our appetites are designed to buy it so that the major position of African man in the world is to be one big mouth, consuming, not producing, consuming. And we even have a bunch of black leaders who think that we can consume ourselves into equality with another people. You can't do it. You have to be productive. You have to produce things to get equality and supremacy. Not buy, not eat yourself to death, not just buy all kinds of junk and stuff. You got to be productive. But an alienated person tries to feed their emptiness, and their whole focus then is upon feeding the emptiness, and they never get around to producing anything. You can sit in this college as long as you want to, as long as you sit here thinking that you're going to get the knowledge that these white people or other people has produced, you'll sit here forever. Because it is until you become producers for yourself that you leap ahead of these people. Because while you're being taught one thing, new learning is taking place. So you'll sit here forever if you think you're going to catch up. You're not going to do it. I'll bring it to a close here. So what I'm trying to say then, the history of black people is related to the psychology, the physiology, the psychosocial experience of our people, and what I call the destiny of the black child is fundamentally different from that of the white child. I alluded to earlier the fact that when we look over this globe, we see black nations in positions of servitude, in positions as producers of raw materials and consumers, but not producers. And yet, regardless of the so-called economic ideology of African nations and European nations and now increasingly Asian nations, and we may as well face this as a fact too, ladies and gentlemen, you may get rid of white domination, but are you prepared for Asian domination as well? Now, this may seem anti-Asian. I want to deal with reality. We live in a competitive world here. And we have to realize as African people, we have to be in a position to compete with any and all other people.
That's right.
And therefore, the idea that we may be cheering the rise of Asian nations, it doesn't mean that we are out of our situation. We still must stand up on our own feet as African people. It is not our role to switch from the providers of raw materials to the Europeans, only to be the providers of raw materials to other people as well. That's not our role. And we must look at it as it is. What does this mean then? Let's look at it in terms of the fundamental destiny of the education of the white child and the black child. I would say that the fundamental destiny of the education of the white child is conservative. It's a conservative orientation. What do I mean by that? That all this child basically has to do is to conserve the power advantage that his parents have made for it.
Right.
And to enhance that power advantage over us. And I would argue that the rearing of this child and the education of this child then, you see, is oriented toward conserving and advancing an advantage. When you look at the position of black people in the world, though, I think you will see a different destiny there. I think you will recognize, if you look at it honestly, that the destiny of the education of black children and the rearing of black children is a revolutionary one. In other words, how children should be reared and educated for revolution.
Yes, sir.
And that's fundamentally different. If we are going to stop our people from starving over the wealth that I mentioned earlier, if we're going to cut this business out of every time we look at a TV, we see some black baby thrust forth as a symbol of starvation and malnutrition, if we are going to gain the benefits of the wealth that our lands provide, if we as black Americans in this country are going to be able to spend more of our dollars that we worked so hard for and are cheated out of to advance the interests of our own people on this soil, we have to educate our black children, our black selves, to take over our own destiny and to revolutionize the world as it is today. And consequently, then, the education and rearing of the black child cannot be some colored duplicate of the education and rearing of the white child, because they're being reared to different purposes, ladies and gentlemen, and to different ends. Your education here should be an education in revolution, a preparation to overthrow this system and overthrow the status quo. That a preparation to rid this nation and this world of black ghettos, whether they be ghettos and as we talk about every day, or they be ghettos and nations. We had the irony of two white men discussing some few weeks ago the destiny of the world. Two people who represent minorities in this world, a minority. And everybody else, all of the people of color, Asians, Latinos, and others, wondering and waiting for these two white men to decide what they're going to do with their very lives. This is a serious situation. How is it that the rest of this world has to sit down and have their destiny dependent upon these two men? How do we know what they talked about in that conference other than the so-called missile treaty? We know in conferences and so forth, many other things are talked about that are not published. Have they discussed the destiny of African people? Have they decided to remove us from this earth? If they did decide to do so, what African nation is in a position to defend us as people? If these people decided to re-enslave African people, which African nation or group of African people can come and defend us against such an intention, ladies and gentlemen? Things basically have not changed. The European enslaved us in part because of what is referred to as tools of empire, a differential in military power. Have we closed that gap today as African people? I don't think so. Even though you may have African men flying jets and all of these other things, are we really prepared to deal with the menace that comes from 400 to 500 miles out of space? Are we prepared to fight Star Wars? Are we prepared to go into space? You can buy a magazine right here now called Commercial Space, where people are already talking about the commercialization of space. This is going to be the next colonial period. We're going to colonialize Mars and maybe other planets. You see articles about mining the moon and mining this planet and manufacturing in the vacuum of space, and a whole lot of things are going on, ladies and gentlemen, out of which we will be left out of if we continue the way we are going, if we do not get into revolutionary education and revolutionary change. We will begin to question whether we will survive through the next century. And that is a major question we have to face. You saw the Star Wars movies? The first one, no blackface in it. No blackface in it. It had monkeys and all other kind of curious animals flying spaceships. Didn't even have a number 2 black man, you know. Which means that the people who are in control of the future don't even see us in it. They've written us out of that future. And given our state, this is the situation we're in. Some people want to be radical by saying that AIDS is an artificial disease introduced into the African continent and introduced among Africans in America to wipe us out. I say then to that statement, so what? What are you going to do about it? So we do go find some nefarious European scientists who created the AIDS virus and find some kind of system that put this virus into the black community and ultimately set up to destroy African people. What are you going to do about it? Knowing this does not change it, does it? Knowing it does not cure the disease, does it? Not at all. So when we talk about education, you see, this is what education is about. Putting yourself in a position to defend your interests, not just working for other people. Germ warfare may really be the warfare of the future, not bombs and these other kinds of things. How much easier it would be then if we would just plant a blight into the crop and destroy people's food basket, or introduce a disease into the population and inoculate our own against that disease and watch them perish as such. We have to think of that possibility, ladies and gentlemen. And it means this then, that people who do not have the educational base, people who do not have universities and colleges and research institutions and so forth of their own, will not be able to defend themselves against these kinds of incursions. The part of the germ warfare is designed as such. The idea is, can you create a disease with which you can destroy another population and create an antidote to the disease with which you can protect your own? Or can you create a disease and see how rapidly another nation can create an antidote to protect itself? And you can see there again that this is more of a struggle between institutions and research staff and medical distribution systems and economic distribution systems and so forth. This is why, again, you cannot make it in life depending upon another people's economic system and another people's health system and other people's systems. You must develop an economic system of your own. You must be able to finance your own colleges and universities. You must finance your own research institutions because they are vital to your very existence as a people. It is not just about getting degrees and earning a little buck here and there. This education will move you into space and defend your interests as people. This is what it is about. It means that you have to have a nation. We must develop a sense of nation in this country, black people, because the economic, social development, and political development of African Americans in this United States is vital to the economic development of African people the world over. And gaining the fullest economic, political, and social power in this country will lead to the advancement of the fullest social, economic, military power of African people the world over. That's one of the reasons why we probably are so miseducated here, because our enemies recognize how vital we are to non-European people the world over. There are other people dying and killing to get the kind of opportunities that we have available to us, even in this discriminating society, black people. When this world is blown up, it will be blown up by educated people, people with PhDs. Educated people, the most dangerous people on earth. Yes, definitely. Educated out of their minds. That's a whole other thing that we have to deal with here. But I'll wind it up. Because, ladies and gentlemen, who produces these bombs? Some guy on the block? Who produces these germs and diseases? Some crack dealer? These people can wipe out more life in a fell swoop than these crack dealers and whoever you talk about on these streets could do in a century. And yet we look at them as being the criminals, as the greatest threat. It's the other way around, but I said we have to be turned backwards, you see. People educated into whoredom so they can create any kind of weapon, any kind of thing, as long as you give them enough money and a professorship. They'll create something to destroy themselves, their children, their great-grandchildren, and the whole of the earth, as long as you get them a house on the corner and get them a little position somewhere in the world. What kind of educational system is that? We think as black people that doctors are here to cure diseases. How many of you are aware that doctors also do research in creating diseases? That's right. That in these are part of the disease, the germ warfare aspect. How many people are aware that these bombs come out of Caltech and MIT and the rest of these universities? When we talk about creating, the Wall Street Journal ran a piece on the creation of a disease, some 23 American universities were a part of the research of creating the disease. And it was a disease developed out of the Rift Valley in Africa. dengue fever, trying to make it stronger so they can destroy somebody. Who's involved with it? Doctors? Agriculturalists? You think agriculturalists are only concerned with the green revolution? No, they're to define bacteria and other things that would destroy crops. You think meteorologists are only concerned with showing you a pretty picture of clouds over the east coast of the United States every evening? No, the ultimate thing, ladies and gentlemen, is to control the weather, to create weather patterns at will. Therefore, we as a people can no longer sit around and let another people have this knowledge and let another people have this information to themselves. We must grasp it, we must control it, we must put it within our own institutions and use it to our own advantage, or else we will perish from this earth. And a part of this then, a part of this destiny of the black child is we must create a national sense within this nation, and ultimately we must create a Pan-African sense the world over. We must be restored to our African selves. We must recognize that our function is not to integrate with an evil system, not to share the pie with an exploitative system, but to bring into being a whole new world order. Thank you, Congress.
Thank you very much, Dr. Wilson. How many would you like to have him as your psychology professor? He's absolutely not. We thank you very much for this very thought-provoking lecture. Just one announcement on Wednesday, starting in March, in room N401. Write this down. Now we have time for maybe one or two questions. I know you have to get to class. So anybody have a question? Yes, sir.
Yes, Dr. Wilson. In the Tawana Brown case, right? What effect is that going to have on her psychological, physiological makeup as a black woman in reference to the white media's bogus assessment of her unfortunate circumstance?
Well, of course, it would be certain I couldn't say to answer that within the exactitude without really.
Okay.
Yeah, but
in retrospect to like this has been happening, black women have always been.
Yes,
sport, fun.
I'm going to generalize because obviously I can't be specific, not knowing her as a person, because and how this affects her individually is going to depend to a good extent upon her own psychological perspectives and outlooks and self-perception and concepts, of course, the kind of family and community support she is provided. In the general sense, of course, we have a situation here again in terms of the way this young lady has been treated, and of course other black women have been treated. A situation that if we do not work very hard to change it, would of course underscore the sense of inferiority, the sense of valuelessness of our women as has been projected before. It was a good gesture, I think, in part of Bill Cosby and others to indicate that we as black people value our women, and that we're no longer going to watch them be devalued by the press that puts in doubt her story, puts in doubt her own personality as such. The intention, of course, of that would be, if it were to continue the way it is in terms of the kind of publicity that's built around it, is of course to maintain the image of black people as not being truth-oriented, or as liars, or fantasizing, or to imply that the woman in some way brought this upon herself, or the other kind of negative associations that I've alluded to earlier in the speech. But I think this case has been a watershed for us as a people. I can see in the actions that are going on now in terms of the demonstrations and, of course, our counter against the propaganda and orientations of the press, the kind of thing Cosby has done and some others. We have reached a point where we are no longer going to let the media and the other people control the slant of information. Once we do that, we will be able to negate and help to neutralize the psychological effects those kind of behaviors against Tawana and others would ultimately have. Because in some personalities, they could really destroy the personality. A person that's been raped, a person who's been abused or violated in that way, many people never quite recover. And many of them suffer for a very, very long time. and their sense of themselves and the kind of things they get into, their maladjustment increases. But I think now with the kind of things we are doing, we can help to neutralize and negate and reduce the negative effects that kind of experience might have put into our mind and personality. It lets us know again, though, that the struggle for the protection of our own individual personality is ultimately a community struggle, that the community needs to support each and one of us, and each of us needs to support each other in the sense of community. In that way, we solve or help to ameliorate any problems that have happened to us individually. One of the things I'd say in this book, the forthcoming book, is that often what we see as individual problems are but political, social problems which have been personalized, which we've made and we've individualized. And in a sense then, much of what we think of as problems that uniquely ours are really problems that are in the political social system itself. And to a good extent then, by changing the political social system, by reinterpreting that system and neutralizing it, we can help to solve many of the individual problems, the problems we think are unique to us just as persons. One other question.
What do you think about the separation of black children because of the color of their skin, or maybe because one of their parents are white, or from another ethnic group, maybe Jamaican or Guyana or something? They seem to have a feeling that they're different than American blacks, that they're not really considered of the African descent.
Mm-hmm. Okay, certainly this is an issue that we need to discuss and work through in this community. Because one of the basis for maintaining the power structure by a minority, as I referred to earlier, is that you minoritize the majority. In other words, you make the large, you reduce the majority to minorities, you see. And therefore, let us say, the Europeans being a minority must create differentiations within the black majority, and that way they can conquer a divided house. So you will find many of us African people achieving our identity not on the basis of our Africanness, but on the basis of our national names. Names given to us often by Europeans. So we identify ourselves as this or identify ourselves as that, not recognizing these are often the names Columbus gave to this island or somebody else gave to this island. And we build our pride around a false name and a false image. And that false identity is used, of course, to maintain this unity within the community. And when we fall victim to it, then we will help to maintain the system that we are in. Those of us who then identify ourselves this way, of course, are helping to maintain the problem instead of solving the problem. That is why ultimately we must see the basic identity of our people as African, as people of African descent. And that is why it is only by looking at it this way that we collectively are going to get out of our situation and our circumstances. This separation is an artificial one. It is one used against our interests. It is one we should recognize as such, and we should get over it as such. We should put emphasis upon our commonality as African people. I've often said the integration that needs to take place is not the integration with whites as much as integration where? Within the own race, within our own race. The assimilation that must take place must not, we don't need it as much outside with whites as an assimilation within our own selves as people. And using that as our base and using our common African descent as our base, we'll be ready to move forward. But as long as we get in and caught up with these kinds of games that you allude to, then neither one of us as a group, whether we're Jamaican or Albanian or this or that, are going to rise to any real position of power or influence in this country. And note again that this is based on, again, that old association psychology, and that is associating Africanness with negativity, such that people then will seek to escape it by attaining any other position. And often the other people will respond to you in terms of those differences. I remember an experience in the South where some black people affected some foreign accent and put on some foreign dress. He would pry into the integration of lunch counters and then to get into some restaurants because they sound different from the local Negroes. You can see a situation often then that will seek to maintain a division by making some of us feel special, by making some of us feel different. And we want our differentness, even if it's a difference in accent, as a way of maintaining the subordination of the group as a whole. We must not fall for that. I get approached by that all the time. People use the word, well, you are different. You know, if they were all like what? You, then, you know, everything would be all right. If you fall for that nonsense, you're a part of the problem, not a part of the solution.
There was something brought out in the House Beach case that Michael Stewart was saying to the white fellas that he wasn't black. He was, he said he was, you know, from an island. And they were saying, well, as far as we're concerned, you're a nigger.
Yeah, you know, some of us have a very childish attitude. You hear some black people say, I don't look at color. You know, I don't see the world in color. I mean, the person victimized back there, you know, in terms of their color, they don't see it. And it's such a foolish, illogical statement. It's sort of like a child that closes his eyes because it doesn't see, believes it's not seen. And so we often think because we don't see color, the world doesn't see us as colored. And because we don't see ourselves as black, the world is not going to look upon us as black. Foolish, stupid kind of thinking. And so there are some people who think that if they don't see themselves as African, or they don't see themselves as black, they're not going to be treated as black. But that very case itself illustrates that problem, doesn't it? It's like some people who think they get degrees, they're going to be protected. You know, there's this kid that got killed over there in the park. And a lot of people were alarmed because, oh, he went to a white private school and he got a full scholarship to Cornell, as if that would have stopped a bullet. And there are many of us who think because we get degrees that when these people start rioting or go marching against us as people, and this is quite possible, ladies and gentlemen, you've got to think of the impossible. You've got to think of the unthinkable. Integration and true assimilation with another group of people is founded on economic good times. And if those economic situations change, the white man is not going to feed your children before he feeds his own. You must recognize that. But we have this foolish idea that whites are invincible, that they're going to go on forever, that the economy is going to continue to grow. We brought this whole American idea of progress, that things are just going to get better and better. We never think about the other side of the coin, that things could change, that food could get scarce, that the power of this nation can shrink, that the economy can change, and there can be a struggle between groups for livelihood and such. But we're given this fairy tale that once we hold little black boys and white girls hold hands together, it's going to go on forever. That is bullshit. There are two things that exist in this world. You must remember two words, not only integration, but you also must remember the word what? Disintegration as well. And therefore that means that some things which have been integrated disintegrate. Some things which have been together fall apart. And so the idea that we may come to love one another, whites and black, and be one, does not mean it has to go on forever. It means that it can switch up and it can change as such. And we have to recognize that possibility as a people and get over that. And this means then that one day there's a possibility that we as people may be attacked on this continent. And we have to prepare for that possibility. It may not be far out. And so those of you who get these degrees, when these people start attacking you, do you think they're going to start asking you, where did you get your degree from? The EMCC. Let me off. No way. They're going to see your black skin, and they're going to lay it on you the way they lay it on anybody else. As a matter of fact, if the system works right, it's going to be the educated ones that get it first. You see? And we must recognize this division is foolishness. Thank you very much.
That's all we have. He has to leave. Let's thank Dr. Wilson one more time. Again, in March, he will be back here in room N401, so write it down. African American Club every Wednesday at 2 o'clock. Thank you very much.